It's where Christianity and culture meet. This is the intersection of faith and Maine. Now, here's Greg Chandler.
Admiral James Stockdale was an American hero. Serving during the Vietnam War, Stockdale performed valiantly, even enduring the harsh realities that come with being a prisoner of war. Receiving the Medal of Honor upon his return, Stockdale was unable to continue his military career due to those brutalities he had suffered at the hands of his captors. His post-military career included teaching, writing, and even advising in a presidential administration. In 1992, independent presidential candidate Ross Perot tapped Stockdale to run for the vice presidency on his ticket. Sadly, the near 70-year-old war hero did not fare well in his televised vice presidential debate. He introduced himself to the voting public with the self-deprecating questions of, "Who am I? Why am I here?" While the lines could have worked into a good opening, Stockdale's debate performance negated any such chances. Often he looked lost and confused, and the admiral ensconced the reputation of an old man who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. 2 years later, comedian Dennis Miller defended Stockdale by saying this: "He committed the one unpardonable sin in our culture. He was bad on television." Still, this one moment in time is what is remembered by those who watch the debate. Admiral Stockdale offers a poignant warning for the people of God. One must be prepared for the effort undertaken. Current times can feel like an unfamiliar reality to those who came of age in past decades. Indeed, it may leave one asking, "Who am I, and why am I here?" There is an ever-present danger of seeking a mental retreat to the good old days, believing that eventually things will get back to normal. The wise man of Ecclesiastes warned against such futile thinking. He stated, "Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this." Such an attitude makes one a relic and of no use to the present time. No matter the era in which one lives, preparation always begins with the solid trust that God is not the God of the good old days, but rather the God who is present and the God who is right. Even in the earliest days of humanity, God sought to establish Adam and Eve in this belief. They needed to trust that God's positive and negative teachings were for their betterment in learning that He is both good and right. Per the command of God, they were allowed to eat of any tree in the garden except one. Concerning this tree, God said, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." All the trees within the garden were good trees, including the tree of knowledge of good and evil. However, their goodness could be realized only in their proper use. When the first couple chose to eat from the tree that was forbidden to them, they demonstrated a lack of trust. They sought to shortcut their divine education and become godly on their own terms. For the centuries of life that followed this terrible decision, they were reminded of what it meant to not trust in God's wisdom. Sadly, their descendants have chosen the same faulty reasoning. Still, God has not given up on His human creation and has sought to teach them to choose wisely. God has instructed His people that the greatest command given is to love God with heart, soul, and mind. Simply put, this means acknowledging that everything in life is done to glorify Him and believing in Him with trusting love. Still, while the greatest command has been memorized, set to music, even pasted on posters, it is essential that a Christian understand how it is implemented. This is the only way to adequately prepare as we stand at the intersection of faith and Maine. Implementation begins and ends with the belief that God is in control. While the times may produce a certain amount of fear as the faithful watch their society abandon godly principles, it is imperative to remain resolute trust in God. In John's revelation, he recorded an interesting scene concerning those who failed in their faithfulness. He wrote, "But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." The first in line for the second death is the coward. While most would perhaps not even place cowardice in a listing of egregious sins, none would likely put it in first place. Yet, its front-of-the-line status demonstrates that the lesson begun with Adam and Eve and continuing through the present is that spiritual success and stability cannot occur unless one trusts in God. To understand this, consider military matters. No matter the time in which one has lived, soldiers know that being prepared for battle means being properly protected and armed. In modern times, nations spend billions of dollars to make sure that their soldiers have protection against the enemy's attack. It's no surprise then that the Apostle Paul spoke of preparedness in military terms. In writing to the Ephesians, he stated this, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over the present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and, as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints." A striking feature of Paul's writing is the realization that the battle faced is part of a cosmic conflict. Somewhat like a wounded animal, Satan and his ilk thrash about, knowing the impossibility of winning the already lost battle, yet wanting to inflict as much damage as possible to those aligned with the Lord. To this, Paul admonishes the faithful to go on the offense, wearing the Lord's armor. The faithful march bravely into battle. There's one other thing to note about this armor. Someone once keenly observed that every part of the body is covered, except for the back. Remember our earlier discussion that the first in line for the second death is the coward? Retreat means death. He also notes that although Satan is defeated, the battle in which we fight is intense. Note again the language. We fight against rulers, authorities, cosmic powers over the present darkness, spiritual forces in the heavenly places. It's odd that many Christians have sought to drain the supernatural from the Bible. The notion that these forces are still at war against the faithful is as foreign to some as a supposed ghost in a haunted house. To hold a view like this is dangerous, in that what is not taken seriously succeeds in taking one off guard. To consider those forces of which Paul warned as only the stuff of fiction gives the enemy the upper hand. Peter also warned about the ferociousness of the enemy. He referred to him as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. This imagery is purposeful. It is to help the people of God realize that wickedness is nothing to underestimate. Thus, Peter warns the faithful, resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. While the first part of this admonition is grounded in personal action, the second part calls for the faithful to realize that they are not in this fight by themselves. Strength can be found in knowing that one is not fighting the battle alone and that others are showing the stamina and fortitude to withstand the attack that's being described as the dangerous lion. This type of relationship can only be enjoyed by those who are committed to the Lord and allow this commitment to impact their relationship with their spiritual family. There is the full acceptance of what the Apostle John taught when he wrote, "And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother." This is the kind of love that cherishes the common bond found in Jesus. In the writer James' warning on the evil enemy, he states that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. He then admonishes us to submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. James' point is that when one stands with God, not only will strength be found, but the devil will also flee. Thinking we have the strength to stand by our own might is certainly a recipe for disaster. It is only when the sheep strays from the shepherd that the lion will find success in attack. With these warnings from Paul, Peter, and James, what is the realistic impact that it should have on the people of God? To understand this, we must understand what happens when God is no longer the center of the culture. Paganism has long since been the norm in world religion. Still today, there are cultures that believe dead ancestors offer protection to the living, cultures where fortune tellers and their like are appealed to with full seriousness. It is easy to look at such things and believe that they're only remnants of backward thinking and not an issue for the enlightened West. Yet, what has always been the case throughout human history is that paganism fills the vacuum when God is removed. So, will Western nations begin to see a rise in such practices as God becomes less emphasized? We simply do not know the answer. But given the course of human history, it is a strong possibility. However, Christians should be resolute in their determination to steer clear of any such practices that link with paganism. Seeking any type of contact, even if it is done in jest, with spiritual forces that seek our destruction is contrary to everything the New Testament teaches. To put it all together then, we put on the armor, standing firm with the Lord and facing the enemy. We realize the enemy's power to destroy, yet understand that the devil will retreat if we do not leave God. Understanding the power of darkness, we then stay far from it, making sure that no alliance is made with those forces seeking destruction. In our past episodes, we've talked about what Christians faced when the government under which they lived put on the garments of Babylon. Christians of any era, including ours, must be ready should such occur. Today, we've added that there may be the cultural temptation to diminish the enemies, seeing them for much less than they are, and thus giving them the upper hand against us. Our point then is this: the people of God must stand firm and be prepared. They must understand that this type of preparedness does not occur in the heat of the battle. It is the outcome of a commitment made at baptism that refuses to turn back no matter the cost. In this baptism, we die and are buried with Jesus, then raised to newness of life. In this baptism, our sins are washed away, but also in this baptism, we say to the enemies of God, both mortal and cosmic, where we have taken our stand. We believe in the eternal Son, who did what no other human was able to do, to be tempted in every point, yet not sin. God has never hidden the fact that darkness reacts bitterly to the light. He wants his people fully aware of what they may face. It is not to be a source of fear, but rather the encouragement that the battle can be won when the right side is chosen. The beast may rage, governments may become Babylon, and the powers of darkness may seek to convince us that they are harmless. But nothing can stop those who stand with the one who has overcome. This is Greg Chandler coming to you from the intersection of Faith and Main.
Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at faithandmainpodcast.com.